How are you?
Good. just just raced in the door from work.
Yep.
Now settle. Get my head in a different space. How about
Time to
you?
switch on.
Yeah, I've literally just put dinner down, literally thrown it down, and,
It's
and we're here.
mine.
Oh, love it, love it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming tonight. Really appreciate you helping us out. And I might kick off. And yeah, there might be some latecomers that come in a bit after, but that's fine. They'll be able to catch up and watch a recording if they need to. So welcome everyone to this webinar tonight on a bit of a wintry Wednesday night. It's not too cold though, so that's good. Firstly, we'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we're meeting on and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I also acknowledge my gratitude that we share this land today, my sorrows for some of the cost of that sharing, and my hope and belief that we can move to a place of equity, justice, and partnership together. Again, a very warm welcome to you all. Looks like we've got about 20 people here tonight, which is fantastic. It's a really good crowd, absolutely worth our while, and for a very good cause. Hope you and your loved ones are faring well in these crazy times. And just wanted to start by saying a massive thanks for logging into the webinar tonight. At Life That Barriers, we're super passionate about finding homes for young kids that need them. And that's what tonight's all about. So we're really excited you've logged in to find out more, especially in this current COVID environment. Every single day we get phone calls from the Department for Child Protection and they're saying, you know, have you got somewhere for a 2-year-old baby? Have you got somewhere for a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old? And every day we got to keep saying no. Because the reality is that all of our families that have got vacancies, they get filled up pretty quick. And yeah, we have to keep saying no. So that's why we're here tonight, trying to find some more special people that might want to open their homes and hearts to look after a young person in need. But we don't want tonight to be a heavy thing. It's a really positive thing. You may watch this tonight and then realize that, just realize my screen is, that's better. Tonight, you may realize that foster care is not for you, and that's absolutely fine as well. The worst thing in the world is when we try and pull someone through the process that's not interested or if it's not a good fit for them. So tonight's really about finding out if it's a good fit for you, as well as finding out if it's maybe not a good fit and if now is the right time. So yeah, absolutely no pressure to go any further tonight. There's definitely an opportunity to progress if you'd like to, but absolutely no pressure at all. So just by way of introductions, so my name is Jerome. So I am the manager for the team that looks after the recruitment and assessment of new families. So a big part of my job is to go around to communities and put on information sessions about foster care and what it is. So obviously, given the current situation, we're not doing those face-to-face events. So we've evolved doing these webinars, and they've been a really positive way we can still get the message out there and still engage with people that are potentially interested and want to find out more. So they've been really good fun to get involved with. So joining me tonight, I've got Christy and Glenn. G'day, guys. You might not be able to see them on the screen at the same time, but when they make a noise, they should pop up. So Christy and Glenn are foster carers with Life That Barriers, and what they also do is a special role which is called a carer ambassador. So it's a paid role. They're actually employees of the organisation as well, and they help out to sort of spreading the word, engaging with potentially interested people. So I might just throw to them just to do a super quick introduction and say g'day, just so you can see them, hear their voice. So Glenn, could you give us a quick g'day and what's been going on for you today?
Hi everybody, I'm Glenn, and yeah, I run a business, which is it takes a lot of time. However, within all that, we manage to do what we do. We've been foster carers for now 3.5 years, something like that. We are permanent, so we have a permanent placement, and it's been incredibly rewarding. So that's a little bit about where we're from and what we do.
Thanks, Glenn. And Christy, what's going on in your part of the world?
Hi, everyone. I'm a kindy teacher, and we do a lot of respite care for other foster families that are doing long-term care to give them a break and to provide some extra adults in the lives of these kids that need all the support that they can get. We're also registered for short-term emergency placements as well. And thankfully, my bosses are very flexible. So if we do suddenly get an emergency placement and I can't go to work because we need to organise childcare or whatever, we've got that option of me taking some time off to get them settled. So yeah, we feel really lucky that I can work when we don't have a child with us, and yeah, I can drop that back a bit if need be. So yeah, that's where I was today. And I've just walked in the door after a staff meeting.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Christy, and thanks for joining us so soon after work. Appreciate that.
No worries.
And I just want to say, if we have any tech issues tonight, don't stress. Who knows how many kids in my neighborhood are trying to stream Netflix or play games, and maybe the same for you. So if my internet drops out or if yours drops out, that's totally fine. We are recording this. Yeah. And if I get booted off, I'll just log straight back in and we'll kick off. And likewise, if you have any tech issues on your end, yeah, just log back in and we'll still be going. We are recording this, so if you need to watch it back at a later time, we'll definitely be able to make that happen for you as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So usually we'll be doing these things at a library or a community center, and here's where I'd tell you where the toilets are and where the tea and coffee is and what to do if there's a fire. Obviously, I'm going to rely on you to know where the toilets are and know where the coffee is and know what to do if there's a fire. I'm a helpful guy, but there's only so much I'll be able to do through the computer to help you if that should occur. So please stay alert throughout the evening. Quick overview for today. So the plan is we'll go through a really quick presentation where we'll talk about life without barriers, just so you know who you're dealing with. We'll talk about foster care, what it is, who needs it, how kids come into care. And that'll go for about 30 minutes. And then we'll talk through some of the common questions that come up when people are thinking about foster care, and tell you what you can do if you want to take the next step. If at the end of this you are really keen and you think it's a good time for you to go further, I'll put a little link in the chat box, and if you click on that link, just fill out your personal details. That'll trigger someone on our system to give you a call in a couple of days and answer any questions you got, and yeah, help you figure out if now is a good time to do more foster care. Just wanted to highlight how we're managing our process in the context of the coronavirus. In many ways, it does make the work more important and more urgent, because what we know is that a lot of families that were already struggling with things in their life are now struggling more due to unemployment and isolation and a lot of things. So it really is having a negative impact on the child protection system, unfortunately. It is increasing numbers. So as much as things have been pretty stable to now, we really are expecting that, yeah, the need is going to increase quite soon. That doesn't mean we can shorten our process or take any shortcuts. We are still needing to do our full process, but it just means that what was already a very important need is even more important now. So firstly, if everyone can just type into the chat box, I'd love to know whereabouts you are watching this from. It's always interesting to see the kind of distances we've got involved. So I'm sitting up in the Adelaide Hills, or just outside the hills in Strathalbyn, sitting out in my man cave in the shed. Got someone from Crafers. I've got a sister in Crafers. I love Crafers. Moana, Seaford, Wallunga, Greenwood, Murray Bridge. Okay, not far from me. Warradale. So yeah, all sorts. Christie Downs. Okay. Blackwood, Highbury, fantastic. Now these are all good areas where we definitely need more foster carers. Tea Tree Gully, so that north, that's great. Ridgehaven, Highbury, Modbury, a lot of northerners tonight. That's good to see. Gawler Belt, wow. Got a very northern heavy event. That's all right, that's good. We'll call that. Alrighty, something else that's always really interesting when we do these sort of things is I'm curious, how long have you thought about foster care? Is it something that's been in your mind for 10 years? You know, for some people, they really sit on this for decades and then they just wait for life to be right. How is it for you? Is it something you've thought about for a very, very long time, or has it just come onto your mind recently? How many years do you reckon you've been thinking about foster care? The most common is usually around 5 years that people sort of have it in the back of their mind. So could anyone put an answer in how long they've had foster care on their mind? 7 or so, that's pretty normal. A year, about 2 years. 4 years, yeah. So that's pretty consistent with what we find. Yeah, 2, 3 since high school. Okay, that's decent. 10 years seriously, but always wanted to. 15, yeah. It's sort of sounds surprising, but it's really not uncommon that a lot of people have it on their mind as something they'd like to do one day, and just sort of wait for the stars to align. So, last 4 children since they completed high school. Yeah, fantastic. That's really cool. All right, so now we'll move on. I'm just going to give you a really quick snapshot of who Life Without Barriers is, just so you know who you're dealing with. And some of these stats might be a little bit out of date because it's an organisation that's growing quite rapidly, but it'll give you a bit of context about who we are and what we get up to. So Life Without Barriers, we're a big national, not-for-profit, for-purpose social service organisation, and we work in more than 300 communities across Australia. We were founded in Newcastle in 1995, initially as a disability services group, and our head office remains in Newcastle to this date. So around the country, we've got over 20,000 clients, over 3,000 foster carers, over 7,000 staff, and over 500 locations. The types of services we're involved in is, of course, children and families, people with disabilities and NDIS, refugees and asylum seekers, youth justice, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, homelessness, mental health, and also services for older people. As an organisation, our values are that we build relationships, that we are imaginative, that we are respectful, that we are responsive, and that we are courageous. And one of our big key drivers in everything we do is that we put children first. So at Life Without Barriers, we believe that we all share the responsibility for child safety. Every single day, Life Without Barriers offers support and care to children. We want each and every one of those children to feel as safe and respected as they should. And we all have a responsibility to make sure their safety comes first, that they're well cared for, protected from abuse, and given the respect that they deserve. So that's the end of the introductory spiel. Now we're going to move on and talk a bit more about what foster care is, just so we can really be clear and be on the same page with that. So by definition, foster care is temporary or permanent placement of children who cannot live with their family. It's a secure and a caring and safe environment. It can be anywhere from 1 night up to 10 years, 15 years. And it's for all ages. So as I sort of mentioned at the start, it's really not uncommon, unfortunately, to get a phone call saying there's a baby 2 days old in the hospital. Have you got someone that can come and pick them up and take them home for a couple of weeks while we figure out what we're going to do next? And yeah, unfortunately, we have to keep saying no because everyone's all full. And then babies up to 17-year-olds. We need everyone in between for all different ages. So foster care differs based on, I guess, the length of stay. So sometimes it's very short term, and we know it's going to be short term, and that's the whole point. And then other times it is going to be longer term, and we expect that they'll be there with you until they are an adult. And it also differs based on the complexity of the needs of the young person. So as we said, in terms of length of stay, there's what we call short term or emergency care. Technically, that's anywhere from 1 night up to 18 months. So that falls under what we call short-term care. Usually we'll have a rough idea how long it's going to be at the start. It could be a 1-week placement or a 2-month placement. And sometimes it's a 6-month placement if there's some legal things going on. But often things do get extended if certain circumstances drag out longer than they were prepared. Then there's what we call long-term foster care, where at that point in time, there is no other options for the young person, and we place them with you, expecting that they'll be with you until they're adults and hopefully afterwards. Then there's also what we call respite or weekend care. That's where you'll provide respite for a couple of nights here or there, or maybe every second weekend or 1 weekend a month, or even just for a week or so in each of the school holidays, where a child who is living with another foster family will come and stay with you. It's a really valuable, a really important role. Definitely do not underestimate the benefit of it, because often that respite is what helps keep those longer term placements stable. In terms of complexity level, in South Australia, we've got 2 broad streams. There's what we call general foster care and then specialist foster care. in reality, we do find that most young people in foster care have experienced some form of trauma, so they have complex needs. So in a sense, we find that most young kids in foster care are specialists and have a level of complexity, but there is I guess, an assessment tool that the department uses, which they sort of look at young people across a broad range of life domains in terms of their physical health, emotional health, educational development, and a few other things. And they do come up with a rating which they feel best guides the type of placement they look for young people. So young people with more complex support needs, it could be in terms of learning difficulties, communication difficulties, physical disabilities, or even what we call complex and challenging behaviours. And we really need specialist foster carers as well as general carers. And if you are interested in specialist foster care, there are some different levels of support. So you do get higher reimbursement, you get more regular support, and extra training as well. So there are some people that really want to devote their life to this and sort of really take it on full time. And if that's the case, yeah, we can really talk about a specialist foster care. Whereas if you want to sort of keep going your life close to normal as possible and keep your work up and all that sort of thing, then maybe something like general foster care may be a better fit. But we're more than happy to have those chats with you as we go along. So now we're going to look at why kids end up in foster care. So the reality is that kids come into care for a variety of different reasons, but it usually falls under a couple of broad categories. Firstly, abuse or neglect from their caregivers, illness or death of a parent, or for some reason their families are just unable to provide for them. It's really not uncommon. There's not a single parent out there who, grows up with their life ambition to be a bad parent. There's always other things that have sort of led to that position in their life. So it could be things like mental health. It could be financial situation. There's all sorts of things that could lead a family to fall on hard times, some within their control, some outside of their control. But the reality is that at a certain point, they're just not able to care for their kids, and some other care arrangements need to be found. So curious, another question for everybody. How many kids do you think are in care currently in Australia? If you could type your guess into the chat box, I'd love to see. We always get a big range of numbers here. So I'm just going to turn my heater off while you do that. It's getting pretty warm in here. But yeah, please type in how many kids across Australia do you think are in the care system? Oh, big range, 6,000, 30,000, 30,000, 7,500, 20,000. Any advance on 30,000? Oh, 59,000. Wow, 100,000. Not sure, but thousands, 50 or 60K. Wow, we've got some really good guesses tonight. So again, this stat is a little bit old, so it could be higher than that. But yeah, as of 2018, there were over 45,800 young people that were not able to be living with their parents. So a really heartbreaking statistic, and one that really rams home the need for foster carers and why we're all here tonight. In South Australia specifically, we've got what's called the Child Abuse Report Line. That's the phone number that we ring if we have sort of concerns over, I guess, the well-being of a young person. And in the 2018-19 financial year, there were over 70,000 phone calls made to that Child Abuse Report Line. And in terms of the type of care issues that kids are experiencing, by far and above, the biggest issue and the main reason kids end up being removed is that their parents are not able to meet their emotional needs. And that's very much a modern phenomenon. A few decades ago, the whole concept of, emotional needs and the need to sort of care about kids' emotions, it wasn't as high on the list, and we had more of a physical sort of outward focus. But, throughout the last 20 years, we've got a lot more understanding of what type of things impact on brain development and what happens to the brain if kids aren't having those emotional needs met at those early ages. And as a result, it's really impacted on the nature of the child protection system and a lot of the work they need to do. And unfortunately has led to an increase in removals around that, because they just realize how important it is and the devastating impact when those needs are not met. Followed by that, around 25% is because of neglect. Around 18% is cause of physical abuse, and then around 13% is cause of sexual abuse. Now, sexual abuse does have a really high profile in our society, and I mean that's good. It's really important that we're aware of that and aware of the harms of that, and that it is a real risk. But it is comforting to know that that's actually quite a small amount, I guess, of the reason why kids end up coming into care. So I won't go into more detail. I just want to give you a quick snapshot, just so you got a rough idea about, why kids come into care, and some of the numbers, because it's quite stark. Of that 45,000 we spoke about 2 slides ago, South Australia, obviously a small part of that population. So it hovers at around 3,000 sort of young people in South Australia that are under the care of the government instead of their parents. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what kids in care need. So now we're going to start moving into the realm of what we look for in foster parents, and the kind of characteristics and attributes that are really important that we look for when we're looking at a potential foster carer. So what we ask of carers, and the fundamental task, is to provide a safe environment to form positive, nurturing relationships with a child or young person in care, to help them build new skills which are necessary to manage life events successfully. But there are some very specific qualities we look for. So over years of experience, some trends have emerged about the qualities that make a really effective foster care. And these include, we need people that are warm and nurturing, altruistic, people that are curious. The reality is you're going to experience a lot of interesting things as a foster carer, whether it be with the child themselves or with the system. So you need to be able to come at that with a sense of curiosity instead of frustration or anger, because no doubt there's going to be a whole lot of things come at you which you're not expecting and you're not prepared for and you're not excited for. And it's really important that you're able to take that on with a curious mind instead of a judgmental mind. So curiosity is huge. We need flexibility. As I said, there's so many things that are going to happen that you don't expect and that you're not prepared for. It's really important that we're inclusive of family. Now, this can be a bit of a controversial topic, but what we know after talking to a lot of kids that have been in care is that keeping a connection to their biological family, the ones they've been removed from, the ones that may have done this harm, is very important for them. It can be hard to understand, and it can be a bit hard for us to accept, and we may have some strong feelings about, their parents given what's happened. And not for a second are we saying that what has happened is okay, but what we need to understand is that those parents and their family, they're always going to be a massive part of these kids' life. We can't just take them into our world and envelop them into our little universe and sort of cut them off from that, because that is not going to be good and it does not work out. It can be very tempting to do so, but what we know is that if we do that and we remove them from their family and we isolate them in our little family cluster, as much as that is well-intentioned, and I'm sure there are some positives to that, and they'll receive a lot of love and care. When these kids turn 13 and 14 and 15, they start asking questions. What's my dad like? What's my mum like? Why was I taken away? And if they don't have those connections to explore that, and if we don't have that full permission and support them with that, we know they're going to run to their families. It just happens weekly. We just keep finding where we are not proactively supporting those connections with birth family, they'll go and find those connections themselves. And especially now in the age of social media, they'll be on Facebook in their bedrooms, or, they'll find a way to reach them, even if we are not facilitating that actively ourselves. So it can be confronting, and that's okay. We don't expect you to feel totally fantastic about it, but you've got to be aware that that is part of the deal and something you are taking on. Doesn't mean you have to let them come to your house and all that. We're not saying you have to violate your own sense of safety, but you just got to be aware that that is going to be happening around the edges, and it needs to be something that you can support. And the best thing for any young person you look after is to have you supporting them in their corner and really encouraging them to have those connections as well. And look, of course, there are some situations where the trauma and the abuse is so significant and so strong that, it's not appropriate that they see their parents. That's fine. But they might still need to see their uncle and auntie or their grandparents or something. So no matter which way we go, there's always going to be some kind of family connection, or we're going to be trying to foster some kind of family connection. And you've just got to be aware of that, and you've got to be happy to accept that, even if you're not excited by it. It's a really important part. And it's also important that you're really sensitive and willing to invest your time and your money. We do talk about reimbursement a bit later on, and the government does give you a fortnightly payment to help cover some of those costs of caring, but it's definitely not a wage. It's definitely not a job. It's not going to put money in superannuation or build your savings account. You need to be yeah, have the time available and have the money to invest in these kids, because that's what they need. Now, I'll be really upfront. These are the qualities we look for throughout the whole assessment process. So I'm giving you the answers to the test. I'm giving you the essay. That's what we're going to be screening for. Even though you might just be having a phone call to organize your training or booking something else in, even in all these informal interactions with us, we're going to be sort of not judging you, but just thinking about you through that prism and thinking if we're seeing those qualities in you. So I just want to be really transparent that that's absolutely what we are doing from the very first phone call that we have. So who can be a foster carer? In South Australia, it's important that you're over 25. If there's a really good reason, we might be able to get away with a little bit younger, but essentially we just use the rule of thumb that you need to be over 25. You can be from any culture. You can be a single or a couple, gay or straight, with or without children. You do need to have a spare room and somewhere they can sleep that's safe. You do need to be pretty well and healthy yourself and have good capacity. But the reality is that everyone fosters. If you come to one of our foster care events that we have in the school holidays or something, it's just a really cool, eclectic mix of really kind people that just love giving back. So it's a really, really great space. In terms of the support that we provide for our carers, there's a whole range of supports around. It includes 24/7 support. So we do run our own after hours hotline. So if any time throughout the middle of the night or the weekend, something goes wrong, you don't know what to do, or you've had a big incident and you need a bit of debriefing, you can call our on-call line, and all of our caseworkers sort of take it in turns at doing a week on of the on-call service. You become part of a big care team. So we like to say that, as soon as you become a foster carer, you have an revolving front door, because out of nowhere, you've then got, a Life Without Barriers worker, then there'll be a departmental caseworker, could be a psychologist, there could be an OT, there'll be a teacher. So all of a sudden you think you're bringing just a child into your life, but in reality, you could be bringing 5 or 10 other allied health professionals with them. Clinical support. So in Life Without Barriers in Adelaide, we've got a team of sort of psychologists and allied health professionals. They don't necessarily provide one-to-one therapy to everyone, but they're definitely there to sort of consult with us and give us guidance, and they can definitely come out and sort of make some assessments on what could be helpful in your case. There's a range of different financial reimbursements, and it's heavily dictated by the age of the child. So I guess the older they are, the more money you get. And then also on the complexity of needs. So the more complex the needs are, also the higher money you get. And that's designed to help, because we understand if you do the specialist care, the young person may have quite regular medical health checkups at the hospital or quite a lot of appointments with other professionals. And that may mean that, you can't work. So of our specialist carers, we do expect that you are able to pick the child up from school anytime or take them to any appointments. And as a result, you do get paid a bit more money to cover some of those costs. You're entitled to access our employee assistance program, which is a confidential phone counselling service, which is available to all staff. There's a stack of social events. So as soon as you get inside the circle, you come into our community and we'll invite you to all things. The respite. So what respite is that I spoke about it earlier, and what Christy can sort of enlighten for us later on. That's where you provide care for a child on an occasional basis. It could be on weekends, or it could be school holidays, and it varies from case to case. But for some placements, it's really important that the young people are able to go and have a couple of nights somewhere else to give their carers a break, and great for the young person to make some other connections too. And learning development. So heaps of training opportunities going on all the time, and also got an online learning system, which has got sort of 50 courses you can do whenever you feel like. So heaps of training opportunities as well. All right. Now, in terms of what the process is to become a foster carer, we'll talk through some of those steps now. Okay, so we break it down across sort of 3 core stages. We've got what's called the inquiry stage, and then the screening stage, and then the interview stage. So in the inquiry stage, it often starts with something like this, like an information night. Obviously, we're doing a webinar format here. Following this, if you do fill out the call me back form, you then follow that up with a phone interview. So we've got a special team of super skilled people that their whole job is just to chat to initial people that inquire to see if foster care is a good fit for them in their life at the moment. If that sort of process goes well, then you'll be referred out to our local office. We'll then give you a call. We may come out and visit your home, but in the current period with the coronavirus, we're doing this mostly over the phone or virtually as well. And then if that seems to be going well and you're still really happy and we're still really happy, we'll then invite you to complete a 2-day orientation course. So that's called Shared Lives. And that's kind of like a foster care 101, just sort of gives you a quick overview of what the foster care system is and what the kids in our system really need. Okay, then we move on to the screening stage. If you do that training and that goes well, you move on to the screening. That's where you'll sign your official application form. We'll do a range of police checks, health checks, household safety checks. And if all that goes well, we'll then move to the official interview stage. And this might be what you conceptualize when you imagine a foster care assessment. This is where someone comes to your house between 6 and 8 times, and they'll work through a whole set of questions and explore a whole lot of issues with you. Those visits might be, 2, 3, 4 hours each sometimes. If you're a couple, then you both need to undergo the full assessment. It can't just be what you might consider the primary care. It's really important for everybody. And then based on all those interviews and all those notes that the assessor's taken, they'll then write up an assessment and they submit that for approval to a government team. So we don't get to choose if you're approved or not. All we do is we do all that work and then we make a recommendation. And then we wait. So the team that we work with is called the Care Approval Registration Unit. So that's the team within the government who dictate who becomes a carer and who doesn't. So their wait times can vary. Could be 1 month that we wait, sometimes a bit longer, but ideally, once we've sent it into them, we should know within about 4 to 6 weeks. In terms of how long does the process take, it really depends. It depends how long it takes for you to complete those required trainings. Sometimes with your timetable and when the trainings run, it's really hard for you to fit them in. And also depends how quickly you can do those assessment interviews. So we try and once we get to that interview stage, we really recommend that we agree to do them weekly for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or at the max, then we sometimes space them out to fortnightly. But once you commence that screening stage, we aim to submit the assessment for approval within about 3 months. That's the sort of time frame we work on. And then, as I said, once we've submitted, the time we wait can vary. It's really important that you have a think sort of tonight or over the next few days about whether it's the right time. It could be that you're absolutely certain that foster care is something you want to do, and that's great. But it might be that it's not the right time in your life for a whole variety of reasons. Do you have the time to commit to the training? Do you have time for someone to come and visit and do those interviews? Is everyone in your family, are they all in a good place? Sometimes the parents will be really excited, but their kids are a bit less excited. And we have to just suggest to them, say, hey, look, maybe now's the right time. It sounds like your kids are a little bit resistant and they're not really feeling the love with the whole plan. So we do recommend that they take some time and just sort of keep working through any concerns their kids have got. And sometimes that's 6 months, sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it means that it's just not a good fit for that family. So that's really important that we work through those issues. So part of that assessment tool is to talk to the biological children or talk to your kids as well, just to make sure the whole family's on board. It's also important that you've processed any challenges you've had in life. The fact that you may have had a hard life and had some hard things happen, that does not preclude you from being a foster carer, but it's really important that you've processed those challenges, because what we know is that being a foster carer can be a stressful thing, and it can be what we say triggering sometimes. So when you have these crazy situations in your life, if you've got some unresolved issues of your own, having a foster kid is definitely going to bring those out. So rather than have that happen and have us, traumatize these kids any further when things don't work out, we'd rather just make sure that you're in a good place and that any sort of adverse experiences you've had have definitely been resolved and, are not likely to cause you further grief, so that when you're exposed to somebody else's strong grief, that's not going to bring you undone and put you in a place where you're really struggling to care for them. So again, having a hard time is not a problem. It's just important that we talk through, how those hard times have impacted you and whether you feel like you're really past those. And sometimes we find that we'll start these interviews and some things will come up and the applicants will realize, oh, wow, this is something I need to work on a little bit. And they might go and have some counseling for a few months. And then they come back later on and it's perfect. They're ready to go. And that's why we do such a thorough process. And that's the end of the actual formal presentation. So from here, That's the end of all the slides I'm going to do. Now we're going to go through some of the formal questions that come up, and then we're going to answer some questions of yours. So try and bring Glenn and Christy back on the screen. See if I can get them up. Just 1 second while I try and configure this. And another one for Christy. Okay. So if after tonight you are really excited and you do want to take the next step, then what you can do, here's a little website link. I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to put it in the chat box. So you'll just be able to click on that link, and you should be able to just click on that, and that'll take you through. I'll just try and paste that right now. So you can see I've just pasted a website link into the chat box. If you click on that link, it'll take you to a little online form where you put in your name, your email, your contact number, and then that'll lodge it on our system and somebody will call you back within a few days. So moving on to the FAQs. One that often comes up is, can I take a foster child on holidays? And the answer, sorry, excuse me, a bit tongue-tied. Answer is absolutely yes. If you're going within the state, you do need to let your sort of departmental caseworker know, because it's important that they know where the child is at all times. So yeah, that's just a matter of process. But if you are going to go internationally, then it's very important that you make advice ahead of time, probably a year ahead, because they've got to organise a passport and there's a whole lot of paperwork and hoops to jump through. So it definitely is possible, national and international. But yeah, we recommend that you start those plans and have those conversations ahead of time. But yeah, bottom line, yes, you can take them on holidays, but make sure you talk to your caseworker and get those planning happening ahead of time. Another common question is, do I get to choose what school they go to? Oops. And the answer is technically no, but you do have a big influence on it. So for example, if the child that you're caring for was previously in the southern suburbs, but you're up in the northern suburbs, of course, they're not going to keep sending the child on the other side of town. They're going to find another school which is closer to your home. So, and they'll definitely listen to your advice, and you may say, oh, all my kids have gone to this school's great, they're really good with kids with complex needs, and yeah, there's a good chance we'll be able to make that happen. Yeah, but at the end of the day, any decisions around health or education are technically up to the guardian, which is the guardian of the chief executive, the government. But yeah, they'll definitely take your input on board. Another common question is, do I get a choice in what child comes to live with us? And absolutely. So as foster carers, you are technically a volunteer. And I guess one of the perks of being a volunteer is that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. So what happens is we'll bring you up with a scenario. We'll say, hey, look, we've got this child. We're expected to be for this long. Is that something you're in a position to do? Can we do that? And you can let us know, yes, I'm keen, or no, it's not a good time. Next one is, are they allowed to call me mum and dad? This is quite a common question, and absolutely they are. It could be the case that they call their birth mum as well, and they might call you mum, or they come up with variations on that mum and dad term. But yeah, absolutely, that's okay. And what we tend to say is that we let the child decide if and when they want to call you that. Sometimes it happens within 2 hours, sometimes it happens within 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, and sometimes it never happens. But more often than not, it's quite common that yeah, foster children will start to refer to their foster parents as mum and dad at some point. Another question that can get people animated is, are there restrictions on pets? So there's no specific rule on what pets you can and can't have, but we do take that into consideration a lot. It's important that your pets are not going to be too overwhelming for a kid. So if you've got a really full-on dog that jumps over everyone and you can't control it, that's going to be a concern, and we'll have to work through that with you and figure out whether you think there's a way we can make some changes there. And also depends on your house environment, whether there's a way you can sort of house the dogs in a certain section or keep them outside, if for some reason the young person was struggling with their presence. So that's the end of the ones I've got. Now I'm keen to hear if you guys have got any questions. So I'm going to try and find a way to share all of our 3 faces at once. But while I do that, please type any questions into the chat box and I'll see if we can get some answers to you. So just 1 second while I try and get these videos configured. But yeah, by all means, please start typing in some questions while we muck around with the settings. Maybe Glenn, anything you wanted to add, I guess, on top of the presentation, anything you thought would be good to mention as well for the guests tonight while I muck around with the video?
I think one of the big things is to know why you want to do it, because you're going to come across some tough times as well as some great times. But it's during those moments when you're down, you've really got to know why, because it's it'll be so easy to give up at times. And I'm not talking a huge percentage of time, but there are moments. And yeah, knowing exactly why you're doing this is absolutely key. Especially when and it may not be the child, it may be another situation, such as the school may not understand, etc., etc. And it's during those times you've really got to know why. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Jerome?
So what was the thing for you, Glenn? What was it that sort of got you to buy in? What was it?
A was my wife, because she wanted to become a foster carer, but hadn't mentioned she wanted to become a foster carer for probably 6-8 years, but had never told me. But at the same time, I was associated with a competitive swimming club, and one of the children there was in foster care, and we got to know this child and so forth. And I thought, that'd be a really good thing to do. And then a bit later on, my wife came to me and said, I want to be a foster carer. And she was a bit surprised when I said, well, so do I. And it just led from there. But for me, I'm an adopted child, and my father, who adopted me, gave me a tremendous opportunity in life, more than I would have had elsewhere. And what I found after doing, this is crazy, but after doing the training and after doing all the interviews, that's my reason, because I am paying my father back for everything he did for me. And for me, that's just a big thank you to my dad.
Yeah, well, what about for you guys, Christy? What got you guys involved in the whole foster care space?
We're both trained teachers. We both love kids. My husband had 3 kids when I met him and got married to him, and then we've gone on to have 4 more of our own. And we've just always had extra kids around the house. It's just something we enjoy doing. And we've seen our children really benefit and flourish from the kind of lifestyle that we provide for them, supporting their emotional needs, their educational needs, all of that. So just knowing that there's kids out there that miss out on that, we just really wanted to be able to share that with more children that would otherwise miss out. And we enjoy it. Like, we enjoy seeing the difference that you can make in a child's life, whether it's just one weekend a month or whether it's for a longer term thing. So it's hard to explain the feeling of why, other than that we love children, and it kind of comes back to why wouldn't we?
So you guys have obviously got kids of your own. How does it work when you've got kids and you're bringing other kids into your house? How do you manage all those dynamics?
It's different with different kids. Obviously, there's different personalities. Sometimes they clash. There's been a few respite kids that we've had to stop having because they've just clashed too much, and it's not been good for the respite kid or our own children. But for some of them, when we've expected them to be a problem, like they've had some really difficult behaviours and high needs, they've actually just meshed with our kids really well. Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch and to see our own children actually grow more patience and compassion and understanding for other kids, and to see actually how blessed their lives are and how lucky they've got it, really. Yeah, and there's, especially in the early days, in the first year or so that we were doing it, there were some teething issues where they'd get frustrated, and they were just, especially with respite kids, because it's like having a playmate over for the weekend, but they're here for the whole weekend. So yeah, our kids still needed that time apart and time with us, yet they wanted to play with these kids the whole time. So teaching them, especially our youngest, who's now 10, teaching him to actually just spend some time by himself or with us, even though there's someone here to play with, was really important for him to cope, so he doesn't get overwhelmed by the end of the weekend. Yeah, and so he's learnt that skill of, yes, I love to socialise, I love to play, but it's important to step back and take time to yourself, which I think a lot of adults don't have that skill, you know, and we burn ourselves out. So yeah, they've all learnt different things, and it's been really good for them to grow in their character through that.
Yeah, cool. And I think the burnout question is an interesting one. And obviously, Glenn, you've had your hand full lately. How do you manage those competing demands, you know, between your work and other personal things, plus, you know, a very complex situation with kids as well? How have you sort of balanced all that? How do you...
Sometimes I've wondered. We've had a situation the past 4 months. My wife suffered an incredibly complex fracture of a lower leg. It actually shattered into 18 pieces, and several operations and everything else later. So I've been running a business full time, doing a quote, putting in the washing, doing a design, taking it out of the washer, etc., etc. So it's been a bit tough. But the interesting thing is, our eldest son and our foster son have both risen to the occasion. And that is the amazing thing, is that despite all the stuff happening, when they are put in a position where they need to rise to the occasion, our young person has been terrific, absolutely amazing. But for me, it's just a matter of staying calm and looking at the big picture the whole way through, not taking my eyes off the ball in terms of, you know, why am I doing this? And the other thing, it's allowed conversations that would not have arisen had this situation not happened. So I think what's happened through this is, you know, we've become tighter, more connected. We talk more, which is fantastic. And in terms of, you know, even without that, you know, running a business with employees and so forth is quite demanding. But on the flip side of it, I don't have to ask anyone for time off.
Yeah.
So as the boss, in quotation marks, you know, I can say, all right, well, I want to go and do this on this particular day, and so I block that in my diary so I can. And we have, beyond that, we have lots of support, and this is critical. We have support from grandparents. We have support. My youngest daughter is also a respite foster carer, and so we can have respite there. We have a number of avenues for support. So if I'm out on site and cannot pick Isaiah up, and Karen was in bed with a broken leg, well, then the grandparents could come over, or the uncle, or one of our friends that was, you know, we worked out with the school, and all the communication was done properly. And your support network is critical, especially when you're in permanent care. Like, you know, we expect our young person to stay with us forever. You know, I want to be at that person's wedding, etc., etc.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks, Glenn. All right, I'm going to hit the chat box, just read out some of the questions. I don't know if anyone else can see them, but I'll read out the question and then I'll also give the answer. So the first question was, do both partners have to be over 25 years old? So we do have some flexibility on that. So yeah, by technically you have to, the actual law, you've just got to be an adult, which is 18. But yeah, we really try and stick to that 25-year-old benchmark where possible. But if someone's 26 and the one's 23, we'll definitely have a look at it. I can't guarantee that we'll be able to go through, but yeah, more than happy to catch up with you and have a chat. So yeah, definitely don't let that hold you back, but just be aware that it could be a complexity. Another one, if a child is unwell, are we able to take them to a doctor, or does that need to go through the case manager? Christy, have you had much experience with sick foster kids from a shine a light?
Not sick as in like, general ongoing stuff, but I've had a few emergency cases. One little boy that was with us for respite fell on our slate floor and put his teeth through his lips, and so I had to go to the doctors. And yeah, that was all quite complicated because I didn't even know his accurate surname, and it was just like, how do I do this? Thankfully, the doctors saw him. They almost did stitches, and I advocated that would be more traumatic to do that than what he'd already been through. And they called in a more senior doctor who actually agreed with me and said, yep, let's just let the mouth heal. But yeah, the most difficult part of that was trying to work out who this child was on their system. And so as far as the case manager and stuff, it was basically address the issue. And then as soon as is practically possible, let the case manager know what has happened. As far as Glenn's probably better at knowing the ongoing, minor cough type stuff.
What have you dealt with, Glenn?
Yeah, well, we have a specific Medicare card for our young person. We have a doctor now that we go to for the coughs and colds and the sniffles and that sort of thing. The department supplies a dental arrangement. But if an emergency happened, the whole thing is get the child to safety, get the child cared for, and then obviously we have to make phone calls and we have to inform the department. We have to inform Life Without Barriers. There's things to do, but the primary thing is the child. Make sure the child is cared for and is safe, and the rest can follow. And that's what we've had to do a few times because children are children.
Yeah, and I can add a bit of detail. So I guess the general rule of thumb is just for day-to-day coughs and colds, you absolutely got permission to organise appointments and go and get those things fixed. Definitely after the fact, it's good to let the child's caseworker know. But in terms of more pointy emergency situations, doctors are not supposed to apply any kind of anaesthetic or perform a procedure without DCP's permission. So there is like an after-hours phone number, which is called crisis care, which all doctors are trained and they should know and should remember to call that phone number before they perform any procedure or administer anaesthetic to a child who's under the guardianship of the government. So next question, I have an interest in keeping siblings together. Would they all need their own room? So yes and no. So siblings together, totally agree. It's really important. We absolutely try and do that where we can. If it's one thing they can't do with their parents, surely we can try very hardest not to separate them from their siblings as well. But look, I'll be honest, there are some cases where they've experienced such trauma together that just being together can be another form of trauma and can be really hard for them to settle and to heal. So there are some rare cases where they do cope better when they're separated and just have different types of contact. But for the most case, absolutely, we try and keep them together. Do they need their own room? That all depends on their age and their stage. So again, if they're 2 and 3 and maybe 4 years old, making them sleep in separate rooms on their own is going to be traumatic on its own. So it's really supported and encouraged that they share. But there comes a point where just for their own personal development, they want their own space, they need their own space. So we need to have, even if they share a room to begin with, we need to know that once it becomes time for them to have their own room, that you've got that space or you can alter your house layout accordingly. Can a child attend the same school you work in? Yeah, good one. I don't know if I've come across that. I don't think it'd be completely ruled out. It could be really, if a young person has a lot of school issues and a lot of anxiety, it could be really fantastic for them and a real support that they know you're there all day. It'd be like your mummy never having to leave you in the morning at drop off. So that could be amazing for some kids. And other kids may not cope because maybe with you there, they would not be able to think about anything else but being with you. So we'd have to look at that one on a case by case basis. But yeah, definitely, I wouldn't say it should rule it out. And another question, my partner works away and myself and our children live in Metro. Would that be an issue? Again, not necessarily. We'll definitely have a good look at that and look at the specifics of your situation, depending on the age of your kids and their level of care needs and how much spare time you got, how much capacity you've got as a carer. It definitely shouldn't be an issue because obviously we've got a lot of single parents that foster care with multiple kids. So if you've got a partner for a couple of weeks of the month, then you're already, got a leg up on a single carer. So yeah, it shouldn't be a factor that rules you out automatically, but of course we explore that with you in more depth. Any other questions? Please type them in if you can, and I'll read them out for everyone and give you the answers. And don't forget, if you look further up, there is a link there, which it's got lwb.tfa forms. If you click on that link and put in your details, you'll then get a call back within a couple of days. So I'll just wait a couple more minutes in case any more questions come in. But Christy, could you maybe give us a bit of indication, what does respite look like for you guys or emergency care? What's the longest somebody has stayed for you under the arrangement? And was that your choice to end it, or was that always just the way the placements were set up? Just to sort of paint that picture a bit.
Yeah. So for respite, we tend to have the same kids come regularly. Most of them, it's once a month for a weekend. As an ongoing arrangement. With the short-term emergency stuff, most of them are started as kind of like a week or two with the knowledge that it could be extended. And then, the first short-term case we had, they stayed for 5 months and then moved interstate to live with a grandparent. So that was DCP's decision. Then the next ones, my husband's job finished up where we lived out in the country, so which was a lot sooner than expected. So the children needed to stay there to be able to reunify to their mum. So that was kind of just had to move on to another family. And one short-term placement we've had more recently, we actually had to end that because it was he was just not compatible with our kids. His behaviours were actually making our kids feel unsafe, so they had to find another family that was a better fit for him. So yeah, it's quite different each time. So that last boy was with us for about 5 weeks in the end. And we got a lot of support from our Life Without Barriers worker, supporting us through that and how to, because it was really hard for us to make that decision because we felt like we were letting him down. But his new placement was so much better for him, and obviously better for our kids as well. So yeah, it was really good to have that support to work that through and process that through, and to help us. Like I was like, well, if he really hasn't got somewhere to go, maybe we could keep him. But our worker was like, no, if it's not safe, if it's not right for your family, we will advocate for DCP to find somewhere else for him. So yeah, that was a really helpful support mechanism as we went through that tricky situation.
Yeah, cool. All right, a few more questions have come in while you've been talking. So one is, if I know a young person who's under guardianship, can you request to be their foster carer? So yeah, it's not actually foster care. There is a specific type of arrangement which is called specific child only care. So sometimes, yeah, a young person who needs a family, they may identify someone in their network who they think is a good candidate to be their carer. And then you'll do an assessment process, which is a bit different, which just assesses you just to be the carer for that person. So A typical foster care registration means you could care for a whole range of young people, whereas a specific child-only assessment is a bit of a different process. So if that was on the case, we definitely are involved in those cases, but usually they're initiated by the Department for Child Protection, and they ask us, say, hey, look, can you do an assessment on this person who might be a good carer for this other young person? So it's definitely possible. Another one is, we have 4 kids and our youngest is 16 months. Is there an ideal age gap before fostering? I'll be super frank with you. I think if you've got 4 kids already and the youngest is 16 months, it may be not the best time. Look, it's still possible. We always recommend you have a couple of year age gap between your youngest and the foster child. Of course, that's just a rule of thumb, and there's always exceptions to that. But a general rule of thumb is that, yeah, it's probably good to have the foster child as the youngest in the family, and it's good to have a couple of year age gap, just for helps your young people feel more secure and your kids to be a bit more settled by the whole arrangement. So that's our sort of stock standard advice. If you feel like your circumstance is a bit different, or there's, you're really passionate and you think you can make it work, happy to have that chat, and we can have someone in the team, work through that with you. But probably just on paper, it might mean I think you've got your hands full for now. Unless you had a real specific idea that, I want to be an emergency care for babies and that only, or just want to be a respite care or something. Maybe there's some life in that, but I'll be honest, just on paper from what we see there, it could mean that, we think you've got your hands full for the moment. Take my hat off to anybody who's got 4 kids. Mm-hmm. Next one down. If you go through the process to become a foster carer, could you foster kids from another organization? Yeah, absolutely. We don't let that be a barrier. There are often times where some of our kids are supported by carers from another agency and vice versa. So yeah, that's absolutely possible. Those pathways exist for those referrals to happen. So that is cool. Somebody's asked about study. So they're currently studying mental health and child, youth and family intervention. Would this help with the process? Hey, look, that stuff's all great, but it's definitely not necessary. It'd probably give you some broader background information, which will help. But as we said, those really key things we're looking for are those personality characteristics. Are you lovely? Are you altruistic? Are you generous? Do you have that, the warm and fuzzies? That's really what makes the difference, is those personality characteristics, more so than how much knowledge you've got in your head. But once you get in the door, we're definitely going to be trying to put knowledge in your head. So there's definitely nothing wrong with that. So if you go ahead with the process of becoming a foster carer, do you need to start fostering straight away, or can you wait a few months? Again, as I said, you're volunteers, so we can't make you do anything you don't want to do. But if you expect that to be the case, then we'd probably recommend we just hold off on starting the assessment until you felt like you would be ready to start. If we got 5 people that are ready to be assessed and we got kids that need a placement, obviously we're going to prioritize those that are going to be ready to go straight away. So that's how I'd probably think through that. If you're already fostering with another agency, would the process to begin be the same? No. So if you're already a foster carer with someone else, then we just do what's called a transfer. So it's a lot less paperwork. It's no assessment really. It's just a bit of a paperwork process that we have to lodge with the government. And they can then have you be a foster carer supported by another agency. So that happens all the time. Sometimes foster carers we've got decide they want to be with someone else, and that's great. And sometimes carers from other agencies want to come over and be part of our crew, and that's fine as well. So now we're all caught up. Glenn, any sort of last comments from you before we wrap up for the night? Anything on your mind which you think would be good to share with the gang while we're all here together?
I think mainly think about, like when we made the decision to become foster carers, we did it as a family, and everybody had to be in unison. And then when we were asked to look after, because we went through emergency first, we then went, we did some respite, etc. So I think we got our feet wet first, but then when we were offered a permanent placement, we really discussed it as a family, because at that stage, our son was 18, but we knew it would impact on him. So we decided to make sure that everybody was on board, not just Karen and I, but all three of us. Plus, we also talk to my other three children, even though they don't live with us, because we knew it would impact them. And we knew, especially with what we were looking at, the first 6 months to a year was going to be very interesting, and that a lot of the things we would normally go and do, we might not be able to do. So we had to make sure that family understood, etc., what we were going in for, and why that, if they wanted to catch up with us, we might not be able to. So as a family, you've really got to work it out. But once you've done that, the support you can get is amazing.
Yeah, cool. All right, Glenn. Well, thanks so much for your presence tonight and everything you've shared. We really appreciate hearing it from your mouth, someone who's in the trenches doing it every day. So thank you very much, and hope you have a great night. And Christy, any last words from you, or anything you think would be great, just to parting words or thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to one of the answers you gave about the if you couldn't start fostering for a few months. I just want to clarify that the actual process of the assessments and the trainings can take a few months or so.
Yeah.
So if it's just that you're going on a holiday in a few months and you don't want to take a placement before you get back from that, by the time you've done all the training, that could be well behind you anyway. But also, I'd encourage people, if they're unsure of whether, if they're fearful of jumping into fostering, it can be a good idea to find other families that are doing it. Most schools and workplaces have someone in them that are fostering, and get to know that family, get to know the child, see their life, because often on the news or whatever, we hear the horror stories of foster kids and the damage they can do, or you hear the worst stuff, but that is such a small percentage of these children. Most of these kids really are such lovely kids that just need a safe and nurturing home. So if you actually get to know some foster kids, some foster families, I think you'll be surprised at how much more doable it actually is. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to yourself, Christy, as well. Really appreciate your insights and your comments. And thanks for getting home straight for work and jumping straight on the webinar. So appreciate that. Hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
So one last question's come in, and then we'll wrap it up. So one more question is, how is the relationship with the biological family managed? Is there a lot of support? So the child's caseworker, the departmental caseworker, is sort of the boss, I suppose, of those family connections. So it's up to them to organize that and to structure that. And in terms of the amount of support, absolutely, that's a really supported space. So ideally, in a perfect world, it's a really casual thing. It's a really informal thing. And, maybe 10 years down the track, it can be organized between yourselves and the other family, and you meet out at a park and have a couple of hours together and then go separate ways. But that's quite rare that it goes that well and it's that positive. It can take a long time to get there, to build the trust between parties, and we definitely can't push you in that direction if you're not comfortable. So a lot of times that kind of contact happens sort of at an office in a very supervised environment. And yeah, you're not required to be involved in that in a specific way and sort of manage that. It's not your responsibility, but it is your responsibility to support that and to have a positive impact on the overall process. So that's not one of your core tasks, to sort of manage and facilitate that, but we definitely really expect that you be a positive influence about that whole process with the young person and support them through that, because it can be really hard for them. I can't imagine what it'd be like to send my 10-year-old boy off and away from me and live with another family, and then see me for 2 hours once a month, and then have to go back and expect that he's going to be happy with that. That's going to be really hard for these kids, and it can take a long time for them to integrate, this really challenging dynamic that has been thrust upon them sort of against their will. So it's a really challenging space, and yeah, I'm not going to pretend it's all roses, but it's a really important aspect of the whole foster care space and the system, and one that it's important that we are supportive of and that we really support. So again, thank you everybody so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate you coming along and finding out more. The link is there in the chat box. I might paste it again so that it's at the bottom for you and easy to see in case you need it. There it is. If tonight is all it is for you and you decide that foster care is not for you, that's absolutely fine. We respect that and we appreciate that. But if this has caught your interest and it's made you think more and made you want to talk more, then we'd absolutely love to speak to you more as well. So we wish you all the very best and your family, and hope you're surviving COVID in a safe way. And I'm happy to sit around. I'll hide my video, but I'll definitely sit here and have a chat through the chat box if there's anything you want to ask me further. Otherwise, by all means, fill out that form and someone will give you a call, and it's a very non-committed conversation you can have and ask some of those more detailed questions and have them really assess your situation on a more personal level. So thank you again. Hope you have a great evening and all the very best. See ya.
See you guys.
See you, everyone.